Should we vote for Schwarzenegger again?
Two-part question. One, if women make up more than half of the voting population, why do we keep electing such emotional basket cases? And the second subset of that is, does Arnold deserve a second term here in California?
I don't know about Arnold. I was trying to get an interview with him this week, and it didn't quite work out. So I haven't been able to. I did do some interviews with him during the campaign. I'd have to do some further studying on how he's doing. You'd have to tell me. But it's, it's interesting. I have a chapter in the book about, they never thought women could hold high office because we would be too hormonally, volatile. But, I joke that at least women are only, hormonal once a month. Dick Cheney has raging hormones every day.
Yeah, the man in orange shirt.
I'm a former journalist. I can't tell you how much I admire both.
He's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist.
But managing editor, columnist, I don't see any daylight between you. Everything you've said, it sounds, to use a male chauvinist term, very clubby.
I guess I don't hear a question in that. Is the question, are we too clubby, or yes? It's a good question. The question is there, I'm managing editor of the Times, which is the news side. Maureen is a columnist and works on the side of the divide that we actually in journalism pay a lot of attention to as a really serious thing. Maureen is of the opinion side, though when we first met each other and became friends, we were both news reporters in Washington. But there is a very real difference between us because, the Times is perceived and often described as a liberal newspaper, but that is really a perception mostly derived from its editorial board and the editorials that we run, and more of the columnists, William Safire was long the conservative columnist voice at the paper, and now David Brooks and John Tierney, who has a libertarian kind of streak, are certainly would not be described as liberals. But Maureen and I are good friends and are here together, but I think that there is a very real difference in the journalism that we do. And I think back to the question about the reality-based community, that it is really important if you're doing searching news side journalism that you try to talk to people on all sides of an issue, not so that you can frame a news story as one side says this, the other says contradictory things, but because news journalists should always be challenging their assumptions and trying to test out whether the facts are really the facts. And the role of a columnist is very different. And I'm here just really playing the role of interpreter and echoing your questions, but am usually pretty careful when I make public appearances to really leave opinion on a different side of a wall because I'm a news person, and I don't know if Maureen has amplification on that.
Yeah, no, actually it's funny because I think with women you always think that they're going to do everything together, they're going to go to the bathroom together, and they're going to have opinions together. But actually on all the major things that have come up that have been kind of controversial columns of mine, we've been on opposite sides of how I should handle it. And I guess after 10 years, you know, for better or worse, I don't really need instruction, you know, on what to think or how to do the column. But it's funny because just as an example of how things are different for women, New York Magazine had a profile of Bill Keller, our, you know, executive editor, the other day, and it mentioned that when Jill first got to the Times and the Washington Bureau, she made friends with other powerful women. And I was thinking, if you flip that sentence around and did it about men, it would be meaningless. It would be, of course, any man who goes to his organization makes friends with men. But with women, there's always that little, and then the next sentence was, they represent a liberal occult cabal. Jill and I. And so I wrote the writer of the piece email, and I said, Joe, why didn't you just use the C word that you really wanted to use? Coven. And I just think when women, you know, they think that women are conspiring and they're thinking together and they're, you know, doing everything alike. But it's not true. And my column isn't even a partisan column. It's just very, I would say, Shakespearean. I mean, I grew up in Washington. I can see that the White House power can be poisonous and your ego gets out of control. And that's what you'll see when you read the Woodward book, that everyone, people like Colin Powell and Tennant, who should have been able to march into his office and tell him the truth about how they felt, didn't do it in any real time that could have helped on the war. And it just creates an atmosphere of tone deafness sometimes and power poisoning. And that's what interests me, and that's what I try to point out.
Maureen, there's a very patient woman here in the black. Ma'am, go. Can you hear?
The press, is she saying?
Yeah. What was the question again?
How's the press done over the last 6 years?
On the job the press has done over the past 6 years.
How's it? Did you hear it?
Yeah, the question is, how good a job does Maureen think the press broadly has done over the past 6 years?
I think the press was very cowed after 9/11 and was not tough enough in most cases, but it, you know, it was across the board, I think. But again, this comes back to the earlier question. I think it's very tough when you're being accused of not being patriotic. And Bush, even this week, you are taking enemy propaganda if you criticize him. It's enemy propaganda. You are hurting our troops. And I think, you know, journalists are citizens and we want the best for the country, and after 9/11 we were all hurting together, and I think it just took the press a while to pull out of that idea that if you criticized the White House that you were unpatriotic. I think that's the greatest form of patriotism.
Bravo.
Okay.
Questions?
Okay, the
There's
gentleman
a
right
question
here.
from Colonel Carlson here.
These are both men who ran away from the sound of the guns. 5 deferments. Bush qualified an aircraft that was not going to go to Vietnam. He knew that. He got in the Champagne unit. They're totally insensitive to death and dying and suffering. Would you please reflect on that?
This is a question from Colonel Vern Carlson, who was G2 and Chief of Intelligence in the Mekong Delta in Vietnam.
The question is how the country should feel about the fact that the people directing the war in Iraq have very limited military experience themselves.